In the 3rd year after my engagement to the heir of Marquis Xuanping, my younger half-sister who was raised on the country estate was brought back. He saw her, and then insisted on changing the person for the engagement. My younger half-sister said she would personally snatch the position of the heir's wife, but she never expected me to just hand it over. Only because I knew that, in a few months, the true heir of the Marquise's manor would return, and he was an impostor. On my 17th birthday, my father brought back my younger half-sister, Jiang Zhouying, who was raised on the country estate. At the grand banquet, she glided with light steps, gave a slight bow, and immediately captured everyone's attention. She was indeed beautiful, making it hard for people to look away. Even my fiancé, the heir of the Marquis Xuanping's residence, was no exception. His gaze was filled with surprise and joy the moment their eyes met. She lowered her head with a faint, shy smile, and said in a low voice, "It has been a while, young Master Pei. I never expected to see you here, that day in the countryside. I am grateful for your rescue and the shelter you gave me, which is how I escaped danger." Pei Jiyuan's gaze was burning, and his voice unconsciously softened a great deal. Jiang Zhouying took out a seal and handed it to Pei Jiyuan. "You left in such a hurry that day, and dropped this calligraphy and painting seal. Fortunately, as fate would have it, I can finally return it to its rightful owner today." The two reunited after a long separation, recounting the past. Unconsciously, they had become the main characters of this banquet. I stood under the veranda, watching from a distance. It was supposed to be my birthday banquet, but the one who stole the show was Jiang Zhouying. The night she arrived at our manor, Father repeatedly instructed me to be more generous and patient with her, and not to bully her just because I am the eldest legitimate daughter. She took the initiative to come and pay her respects, but ended up telling me about her past with Pei Jiyuan. "Elder sister, when I saved him and took him in that day, I never expected he would turn out to be your fiancé. It seems this was destined to happen." A smile played on her lips, one with a hidden meaning. Last year, during the rainy season, Pei Jiyuan went missing for 3 months while he was out on business. After his return, he said he had encountered heavy rains in the mountains, a landslide had blocked his path and he had been injured, so he stayed elsewhere to recuperate for a while. He returned safely, and never spoke of his encounters and experiences during those few months. I never thought that he was actually saved by Jiang Zhouying. I have no way of knowing what happened during those 3 months. But ever since he returned, Pei Jiyuan's attitude towards me changed drastically, and he became very resistant to this marriage. Now, the entire capital knows that the recently returned 4th miss of the Jiang family is a rare beauty, and more so, the savior of the heir of Marquis Xuanping. As for the various stories about what happened, many versions are already circulating among the public. Pei Jiyuan, acting even more out of character, frequently came to visit. Sometimes he would bring the best pastries from Piaoxiang Lu. Other times he would order Qingfeng Lu to craft the most fashionable jewelry and head ornaments. And each time he would personally deliver them to Jiang Zhouying, and then chat for a long time. I looked at the things he had his maids deliver, and just had them take them away to be distributed. The people in the manor could clearly see his ulterior motives, and they all joked behind my back that the Shizi was quite taken with the newly returned 4th miss, that she was the one who looked like the future Shizi's consort. I didn't pay any mind to such talk, but Pei Jiyuan's attitude towards me grew increasingly terrible. When he came, I was in the medicinal herb garden. He said some baffling things in an unfriendly tone. "Jiang Yanzhou, Zhouying saved me in the mountains that day, and that is how we formed a bond. I hope you can be more magnanimous and not throw a petty tantrum to make things difficult for her over this." Between the lines, he was saying that I was making things difficult for Jiang Zhouying out of jealousy. It seems she has been whispering quite a bit in his ear behind my back. I kept my head down, tending to the medicinal herbs, and didn't look up at him, just saying nonchalantly, "Is that all? The Shizi is overthinking things. I don't care who you have a bond with, and I certainly won't make things difficult for anyone because of it." He seemed to feel like he had punched a wad of cotton, and inexplicably grew a bit more resentful. You'd better practice what you preach." I heard that Pei Jiyuan had a falling out with the family elders. When he visited again, he actually made a rather rude request. He said to father, "For the Zhang family, by its social standing, to marry into the Marquis Xuanping's residence is truly marrying up. But since this is a marriage arranged by grandfather, I will definitely not defy it. It is just that the person for this engagement has to be changed." His actions these past few days have been completely unscrupulous. Anyone with eyes could see what he was trying to do. Father frowned slightly and asked in confusion, "Change? How do we change?" Pei Jiuan stood with his hands behind his back, his eyes filled with arrogance. The eldest young miss acts outrageously. A few days ago, on her way to burn incense, she actually delivered a baby for a village woman. She is still a maiden, yet she disregards her reputation like this. She is truly unworthy of the position of the heir's consort. Grandfather's intention back then was for the Pi and Zhang families to be joined by marriage. As for who marries into the Pi family, I believe it makes no difference. Since that is the case, why not let the fourth young miss fulfill this marriage contract and have her marry into the Marquis Xuanping's residence? After thinking for a moment, father looked at me. I took a step forward, raised my eyes and said, "The Zhang family's legacy is in the medical arts, and grandfather also passed down the Zhang Corporation's acupuncture techniques to me. In the eyes of a doctor, there is no distinction between the noble and the humble, and certainly no such thing as tarnishing one's reputation. Your Highness, your words, criticizing me for saving a life, are rather unbecoming of your stature. It seems you are not one who walks the same path as I. If your Highness has feelings for fourth sister, I would be happy to oblige." Zhang Zhouying put on an act, waving her hands repeatedly, and said in a gentle voice, "My status is humble. How would I dare be a match for the heir?" Pei Jiuyuan stood beside her and said with a resolute gaze, "It is you as a person that I've chosen. What is all this talk about being a match or not?" He made his preference perfectly clear, and everyone's gazes turned towards me, seemingly with some sympathy. Pei Jiuyuan's status was noble. He was the only son of Marquis Xuanping and Princess Hiang, and his position among the young masters in the capital was second only to the prince's. He had always been proud, and for years, his word was law. His visit today meant he had already made up his mind. This was an announcement, not a discussion. Father already felt he had wronged Zhang Zhaoying all these years, so under the circumstances he just went with the flow and agreed. Anyway, Pei Jiuan himself would bear all the resistance. As he was leaving, Pei Jiuan unexpectedly glanced back at me. After everyone had dispersed, Zhang Zhaoying slowly walked towards me, a smile on her lips and provocation in her eyes. "Elder sister, the several months I spent with him in the mountains wasn't some kind of fate or destiny. It was something I did on purpose. At that time, I already secretly knew he was the heir of the Marquis Xuanping's residence. And even more so, the man you were betrothed to." My expression was normal. I just gave her a faint glance. "You like him?" She had a playful look on her face, then said, "Older sister, I'll personally snatch away the position of Shizi consort, snatch away everything you have. This is what you owe me. Since you covet that position of Shizi consort so much, I'll let you have it." After speaking, I turned and left. She was still clamoring behind me. "Zhang Yanzhou, even now you still have to act tough to save face. It wasn't you letting me have it. I snatched it with my own hands." Her voice was full of smugness. I hope when the truth is revealed in the future, she can still manage to laugh. Pei Jian is not the real Shizi of the Marquise's mansion at all, just a cuckoo in the nest. In the future, both his status and the title of Shizi will have to be returned to that person. Jiang Zhaoying keeps saying that this is what I owe her. She was sent to the country manor since she was a child, and could only be brought back after she grew up. This was the rule set by grandfather back then. The day she returned, I could see the resentment in her eyes. She was not at all the understanding person she appeared to be. Her birth was destined to never see the light of day. I never owed her a single thing. Back then, when the late emperor passed away, it was during the period of national mourning. Her mother was merely a songstress who became father's mistress, and she had her during the national mourning period. If the matter were exposed, It would be a serious crime that no one could escape. Grandfather had no choice but to send her to the country manor and falsify her age. But now, she actually has the nerve to say that I owe her. The marriage between the Pi family and the Zhang family was arranged by Pi Jiyuan's grandfather and my grandfather together. Before Pi Jiyuan was 9, he was ill, sick and weak for a long time, and was bedridden. It was my grandfather who cured him. Pi Jiyuan's grandfather, who was also the previous Marquis Xuanping, personally arranged the marriage contract so that the two families would be joined by marriage in the future. My marriage with Pi Jiyuan was finalized 3 years ago. After they passed away, the marriage unexpectedly ran into complications. Everyone lamented that, unexpectedly, my marriage was stolen by my illegitimate younger sister, who had just returned. But Zhang Zhaoying was not satisfied. She told father that she wanted her mother's memorial tablet to enter the Zhang family home openly and honorably, for her to worship. When father was hesitating, I gently reminded him, if she becomes the heir's wife in the future, the authorities will investigate her background in detail. If that old affair from back then is dug up fooling around with a songstress during the national mourning period, I am afraid your official career will be at risk. Just that one sentence was enough to make him reject Zhang Zhaoying's request. She didn't give up. Instead, she told father that her status was too lowly, and she wouldn't be able to establish a foothold in the Pei family in the future, so she wanted to be registered under the main wife's name. Back then, father fooled around with a songstress and kept her as an outside mistress, which angered mother so much that she fell gravely ill for 3 months, leaving her with chronic health problems. Now, she actually wants to become mother's daughter to raise her own status. How could there be something so ridiculous in this world? When father came to ask me, I was mulling over a medicinal prescription. His tone was testing my stance. I chuckled and said, "Father, I can't be the one to decide this. Uncle has held a grudge over mother's death from illness for many years, and today, you deliberately used that mother and daughter to provoke him. When he returns from the borderlands in the future, how will you explain yourself?" Upon hearing this, his eyes flickered, as if he was contemplating something. He was unwilling to inherit his grandfather's aspirations, and even less willing to spend his days with medical books and herbs. His mind was set solely on his official career, and as long as he was still in the court, he would not deliberately offend uncle. Looking at his hesitant and troubled expression, I chuckled. "I am willing to ease father's worries," he asked thoughtfully. "What is your solution? Since we don't want to expose her origins while also raising her status, why not just announce that younger sister is Auntie Chu's daughter, sent to the countryside to recover from illness since childhood? Auntie Chu is a noble concubine from a respectable family, and has been managing the household all these years, practically a matriarch. This wouldn't be a disgrace to younger sister." "All right, let's do that then." A hint of relief showed in his eyes. Apparently, this was something Zhang Zhaoying had relentlessly pestered him for, and solving it this way meant he could finally give her an answer. In the past, he used to visit the country estate every once in a while. Thinking back on it now, he was probably going to see Zhang Zhaoying. He thought the matter was resolved, but in fact, it wasn't. How could what Zhang Zhaoying wanted be just to be the daughter of a noble concubine? If she could, she wished she could win the position of mistress of the house for her mother. The manor was bustling with preparations for the wedding. Pei Jiwan not only changed who he was engaged to, but he even moved the wedding date up by half a year. Zhang Zhaoying's courtyard was a flurry of activity, while my place, in contrast, seemed exceptionally quiet. I summoned my personal maid, Zhu Yi. "Is everything I asked you to prepare ready?" She nodded, and I instructed, "Send them out. This is just my way of helping him. I just hope his path back to the Marquise's mansion will be a little smoother." When Zhang Zhaoying got married, she said with a smile, "Elder sister, don't be disheartened. In the future, I will certainly have the Shizi find a good husband for you from among his subordinates." Those words of hers were truly audacious. She sat in front of the bronze mirror, and I stood behind her, picking a hairpin from her makeup box and putting it on her head. "You are radiant today, sister, and let's look to the days to come." Pei Jiwan personally came to welcome the bride, which made it all the more solemn. For a time, what spread all over the capital was the beautiful story of their first meeting in the mountains and their reunion with a life-saving benefactor. And even more widely sung was the tale of the marquise's heir, who cast aside class prejudices to insist on marrying a concubine's daughter. These were all Peiyuan's handiwork. He was clearly the one who broke his promise, yet he was able to use such cleverly twisted words to protect his own reputation. And as for me, not a single word will be written about me in this story. Zhang Zhouing became the heir's consort, and she was always seen at the banquets of the aristocratic families. Whenever others talked about her, they never forgot to bring me up. They said she had a good fate, and when they brought me up, most would let out a sigh. In the blink of an eye, it was time for this year's examination results to be announced, and the top 3 scholars had been chosen. On the day they paraded through the streets on horseback, I was standing high up in a tavern, looking down at the lively scene on the street, and that Tan Hualang, as it happened, was looking right at me. I raised my wine cup and toasted him from afar. It should have been his moment of glory, yet he was shrouded in a certain heaviness. The road ahead for him would not be easy. A few days later, a major event occurred in the capital, at the Qianglin banquet. As the new scholars were having an audience with the emperor, Tan Hualang Gu Hanzhang knelt down, directly brought up an old matter, and forcefully accused the current heir of Marquis Xuanping of having been switched with another baby back then, that his identity was fraudulent. A cuckoo in the nest. Peiyuan is a fake heir. When this news got out, the entire capital was in an uproar. The status of heir of the Marquis Xuanping's residence was not so simple. It also involved the royal family. Peiyuan was the most noble among the current young masters of aristocratic families, not only because his father was Marquis Xuanping, but also because his mother was Princess Heiyang. Princess Heiyang was the current emperor's full-blooded younger sister, so Peiyuan was also a maternal cousin to the various princes. After their return, the lights in the Marquis Xuanping's residence stayed on all night, and for a time, the household was thrown into utter chaos. Peiyuan was placed under house arrest within the Marquis manor, forbidden from taking a single step out until the truth comes to light. Tanhua scholar Gu Hanzhang personally handed over the token that day, which was indeed the black jade personally bestowed by His Majesty 20 years ago. It was a tribute from the southwestern foreign states, unique in all the world, and was gifted to the princess back then as a congratulatory gift for her son's birth. When the heir apparent of Marquis Xuanping was not yet a month old, the capital encountered the rebellion of Prince Yang. During the rebellion, the young crown prince was taken from the capital by his guards. 3 years later, after the rebellion was quelled, the guards brought him back. This piece of jade was lost during the rebellion, and unexpectedly, it has resurfaced 20 years later. The situation has developed beyond everyone's expectations. They thought it was just a Qianglin banquet, but never expected to get dragged into the secret of the real and fake crown prince. Now, of course, it can't be considered a secret anymore. It is known to everyone, and the whole world is watching. And this is Gu Hanzhang's true purpose. He insists on exposing it in front of everyone, to take back everything he has lost. I gazed into the distance. His methods were, of course, far more ruthless than I had imagined. Father came rushing over, worried sick. Your sister has only been married into the Marquise's mansion for a few months, and something like this has happened. What are we to do? I put down the silver needle in my hand, glanced up at him, and said lightly, Sister is doing just fine in the Marquis Xuanping's mansion right now. Father, you don't need to be so worried. Seeing me so calm, he accused me resentfully. You were supposed to be the one to marry into the Marquis's mansion. Now your sister is taking the disaster for you. Yet you are so cold-blooded, not at all concerned about her future. Father, whether she is taking the fall for me or she coveted wealth and glory, you and I both know full well. To try and save face with such words now, while also blaming me, is utterly ridiculous. As I nonchalantly exposed these matters, his expression turned even uglier. I spoke again. Father, you should know that even if Peiyuan is the fake heir 20 years ago, he was just a child. The switching of the bloodlines was done by others. His crime is not punishable by death, so my sister will naturally be fine. What you are worried about isn't her safety, but her future wealth and glory." Seeing that I wasn't holding back, he snorted coldly. But after a long moment, he tacitly agreed with my words. He seemed a bit tired. He heaved a long sigh and said in a low voice, "Who on earth is the real heir to the Marquise's mansion?" Looking at his helpless and anxious expression, I replied calmly, "I am sure you already have an answer, father." It wasn't just him who had an answer. The powerful and noble of the entire capital probably did too. To be able to produce a jade pendant as a token and dare to cause a stir directly in front of the emperor, how could anyone dare to do so without complete confidence? His Majesty personally issued an edict, ordering a thorough investigation into this matter. I heard that Gu Hanzhong's adoptive father, Gufeng, was also brought back. That man is no ordinary person, but one of the guards from the Marquise's residence back in the day. 20 years ago, Prince Yang led rebel troops into the city, and for a time, chaos from the conflict erupted everywhere. Princess Heiyang had just given birth to a son, and Marquis Xuanping had to lead his troops to face the enemy. At this critical moment, he had a team of guards take the young heir and retreat first through a secret passage to escape the capital. Afterward, when the rebellion was quelled and the heir was brought back, it was already 3 years later. The team of guards back then originally had 12 men. But upon their return, only one person remained. This person is the current captain of the guards at the Marquise's residence, Lu Zi, and also the Lord Marquise's most trusted confidant. But now Gu Hanzhang's adoptive father, Gu Feng, has personally accused Lu Zi of ambushing and secretly harming the other guards back then, and even intending to kill the heir, going so far as to deliberately set fire to a dilapidated temple. Fortunately, the heavens were watching, and Gufeng escaped the great fire while holding the heir. After he recovered from his old injuries and returned to the capital, he heard that Lu Zi had already returned safely with the heir. In Lu Zi's account, the rest of the men all died at the hands of the rebel soldiers during the escort journey, and only he alone fought to the death to protect the heir and escape. Gufeng clearly knew the one who stayed by his side was the real heir. But Lu Zi brought back a child. At that time, Lu Zi had already become the captain of the guards in the Marquise's residence due to his merits on that day. Gufeng didn't dare to visit unannounced at all. If he alerted the enemy, not only would he be unable to see the Marquise and the princess, but he would also invite a fatal disaster upon himself. He could only endure for many years, raising the heir until he grew up, and then find a good opportunity to expose the truth. With all sorts of evidence laid out before them, under severe torture, Lu Zi confessed everything. He personally said that Pei Jiwan was his son, and that due to a moment of greed, he attempted the leopard cat for Prince's swap, using a fake to impersonate the real one and take his place. Gu Hanzhang had been wandering outside for many years, which also allowed Pei Jiwan to take his place. When Princess Heiyang saw Gu Hanzhang, she stood stunned for a long while. When Gufeng said that Gu Hanzhang had a small mole behind his ear, the princess quickly took a closer look, and in that instant, tears streamed down her face. The young heir was sent away right after he was born. His features not yet fully developed. By the time he returned, he was already 3 years old. The princess said that Pei Jiyuan didn't have the small mole behind his ear that he was born with. She had her doubts back then, but after asking the imperial physician, the physician also said that a small mole from childhood could fade with age until it disappeared. 3 years had passed, so perhaps the mole had disappeared. Just like that. Only then did she let go of her doubts. But she never imagined that her son had actually been replaced by someone, wandering outside for many years. After several months, the fog lifted. Lu Zi was executed and the truth of the real and fake young lord finally came to light. When the news got out, everyone in the capital sighed endlessly. Pei Jiwan was unwilling to accept this truth and smashed the decorations in the room to smithereens. Gu Hanzhang had not yet been brought back to the Pi family, but Pei Jiyuan was already kneeling inside the Marquise's manor. Kneeling for 2 whole days in the pouring rain, repeatedly begging them to give him a chance to atone. When Zhu Yi was telling me this news, she sighed that fate is unpredictable, and that from now on, Pei Jiwan would probably fall from the clouds into the mud. but I shook my head and gave a light sigh. It probably won't be that easy. Afterwards, word came that Peiyuan had stabbed himself in the chest with a dagger, attempting suicide inside the residence of Marquis Xuanping, claiming he was willing to use this life to atone for his sins. The imperial physicians went in and out many times, each with a grim expression. Just as I expected, he wouldn't leave the Pei family so easily. Once he leaves, he would be like a stray dog, with nothing left. He is using a self-harm ploy, hoping to win a shred of sympathy from the Marquis and the princess. Years of kinship are hard to cast aside in a single night. I have to say, by gambling with his life, his chances of winning are very high. Peiyuan was kept at the Marquis's manor to recover from his injuries, as an adopted son. And this, Marquis Xuanping announced to the public himself. This point is truly puzzling, if it is out of consideration for their bond of nearly 20 years. Not holding him accountable and saving his life is already the epitome of kindness. But to continue raising the bloodline of a man who betrayed his master, keeping him close, giving him status, and letting him enjoy wealth and splendor. What sense does that make? The entire capital is praising Marquis Xuanping for repaying malice with virtue, being tolerant and benevolent, and not implicating the innocent. But I have a feeling this matter isn't as simple as it seems. The next time I saw Gu Hanzheng, it was in a tea house. He was surrounded by people, each one fawning and flattering. He was no longer the down-and-out scholar I first met, anxious to get to the capital for the imperial exams. He was now a highly sought-after new favorite in the court, the Tanhuolang personally chosen by His Majesty. He had already been the talk of the capital, and with the truth now revealed, he was backed by Princess Heiyang and the Marquis of Xuanping's estate. Even the current emperor was his maternal uncle. With a status like that, how could everyone not try to curry favor with him? But he stood with his hands behind his back, his expression cold, exuding a natural air of aloofness that invisibly kept everyone at arm's length. When he saw me, he had the people around him sent away, and at last there was some peace and quiet. As we sat down in a private room in the tea house, a rare hint of a smile touched the corners of his mouth. I said softly, "Congratulations." He poured a cup of tea, placed it in front of me, his sleeve brushing past with the elegant air of a cool breeze through bamboo, and said gently, "On my way to the imperial examination that day, if you hadn't saved me with your needles, how would I still be alive and standing here? I should thank you, but I don't know how." When he finished speaking, he raised an eyebrow and looked at me, his eyes full of inquiry. "Your words of reminder that day can be considered thanks enough," I replied, looking up. That day, I was leaving the capital to go to my maternal grandparents' house, and saw him on the official road in Fengzhou. He had been bitten by a poisonous snake, and was gravely poisoned, and it was I who saved him. Because of this, I also stayed in Fengzhou for half a month. He is a clever man. From the carriage and snippets of conversation from my accompanying maid, he figured out my identity. My maid was still worried that after Peiyuan returned from his trip, he had become increasingly distant and cold towards me. But Gu Hanzheng lowered his brows and whispered in my ear, "He is just a fake heir of a marquise's house. You might as well not have this fiancé." Only I heard these words, but at that time his gaze was steady, not like he was joking. Grandfather had told me many old stories about the Parry family, including the heir's life story of being sent away during the chaos of war and his difficult return. He also said that the heir had a small mole behind his ear when he was born. When I saved Gu Hanzheng, I had seen the mole behind his ear. At that moment, a bold guess formed in my mind, and later, Gu Hanzheng's words and actions went on to confirm my suspicion step by step. To me, the marriage between the Pi family and the Jiang family has always been a shackle. I also see that gloomy Marquise's mansion as a cage, and I loathe self-righteous people like Peiyuan even more. Unfortunately, the marriage was arranged by the elders of both families, not something I can back out of on my own. What is more, the Jiang family is of low status and little influence, and doesn't dare to offend the Marquise's mansion. But if some complications could arise in the middle of this, Perhaps there would be some leeway regarding the marriage between the two families. So I chose to help Gu Hanzhang travel to the capital for the imperial examination, and hoped he could stir up some trouble for the Pei family. I originally wanted to use him to end my marriage with Pei Jiyuan. But later, Zhang Zhouying's sudden appearance was beyond my expectations. All the trouble she caused actually made Pei Jiyuan take the initiative to change the marriage arrangement, allowing me to get out of it smoothly. Although her audacity annoyed me, the result she achieved was a pleasant surprise. It is just that today's situation, for Zhang Zhouying, is surely torture. Now, Gu Hanzhang has done it. Pei Jiyuan is no longer the heir of the Marquise's mansion, and the Pei family is in turmoil. But all of this has nothing to do with me anymore. He and I stood by the window, and saw a luxurious carriage pass by ostentatiously below, with a large entourage. That is the carriage of the Marquis Xuanping's mansion, and the most luxurious carriage at the very front belongs to Princess Heyang. Looking at the direction it is heading, it is exactly where Gu Hanzhang is staying. You should go back, I reminded him. Princess Heyang making such a grand display is all to bring her son back. He seemed to have more to say, but this was no longer the time to talk. He was brought back to the Marquise's mansion, and entered the palace as the son of Princess Heyang to have an audience with the Emperor and the Empress Dowager, but he was unwilling to change his surname back to Pei. He had already been imperially appointed as this year's Tan Hualang. Besides his immense talent, his graceful bearing was even more remarkable. The Emperor had always cherished talent, and now knowing they were blood-related, he regarded him with even greater importance. Since ancient times, there has been the fine tradition of snatching a son-in-law from the rankings. The Grand Tutor of the court had long set his eyes on him and went before the Emperor to request an imperial marriage for his granddaughter. Unexpectedly, he rejected the marriage publicly, stating, "My grandfather already arranged a marriage for me back then. I am already engaged, so I am afraid I cannot accept the kind intentions of your Majesty and the Grand Tutor." In the Emperor's presence, he personally acknowledged this engagement, and moreover, used it to refuse the imperial marriage decree. Marriage with the Pi family was brought up again, becoming the after-dinner gossip among the aristocratic families. The engagement set by the old Marquis was indeed for the heir of the Marquise's mansion, and now that he wanted to acknowledge it, others could not say anything. They sighed to themselves that my marriage was always full of twists and turns, its fortunes and misfortunes unpredictable. I was abandoned by Pei Jiyuan back then, and today the true heir has returned to fulfill the marriage contract. Although it wasn't reconfirmed because of Gu Hanzhang's words before the throne, everyone's attention was once again focused on me. But for me, this was trouble stirring up again. Zhang Zhouying secretly returned to the Zhang family, pulling on her father's sleeve and crying her eyes out. When she got married, she was so smug, but now she is inevitably dejected. When she saw me, her hostility hadn't lessened, and she even seemed to resent me more. Pei Jiyuan's status in the Marquise's manor is awkward, and so is hers by extension. In the future, she won't be active at the banquets of the capital's prestigious families anymore, and it will be hard to recapture her former glory. With Gu Hanzhang and Pei Jiyuan now living under the same roof, I am afraid things won't be peaceful. A few months later, Pei Jiyuan's old illness relapsed due to cold entering his body. The pain was unbearable, and he couldn't even get out of bed to walk. For this, they searched everywhere for famous doctors. Both the imperial physicians from the palace and itinerant folk doctors were invited into the manor by the Marquis of Xuanping. But none of them could find a cure. An old imperial physician mentioned that my grandfather had cured a young Pei Jiyuan back then, with a unique set of acupuncture techniques he created, and that if the same techniques were used, it should be effective. People from the Marquis of Xuanping's manor came to the Jiang family's door seeking help. But by this time, I had already left the capital under a pretext. Ever since I started studying medicine at 7, I would leave the capital with my grandfather every year for a while to provide free medical consultations. This year, I set off half a month earlier. The free clinics are often held in remote places, so they aren't that easy to find. When I left the Zhang family, I had already told them that I would only be back after several months. Pei Jiyuan's illness won't kill him for now. It will only keep him in pain. On this trip, I stayed in a purple bamboo forest in Yangzhou. The common folk from the surrounding villages would all come for consultation, forming a long queue outside the bamboo forest. There are too many people here who are sick but can't get treatment. They have no silver for consultations and medicine, so they can only endure the discomfort. Only when they happen upon a doctor offering a free clinic do they dare to come forward and ask. Whenever there was a free clinic, I would be busy the entire day, only getting a moment of leisure at night. Grandfather said that a healer cannot just sit in a grand residence reading medical books. Armchair theorizing is the greatest taboo. One must step out of their home and see the world's many illnesses with their own eyes. I stayed in the purple bamboo forest for 3 months, and the surrounding common folk brought me the fruits and vegetables they grew themselves. There was so much that in the end, I had to politely decline their kind offers. These people didn't know the figures of the capital, let alone the grievances and entanglements of the great noble houses, which gave me an inexplicable sense of peace. It was as if all the schemes and plots, all the rights and rules ceased to exist. Here, I didn't have to be bound by my identity as the eldest legitimate daughter of the Zhang residence. I was just a healer. But such simple and pure days, after all, could not last for too long. The time to return had come. As soon as I entered the capital, people from the Pai family swarmed around me, giving me no chance to return to my residence. The Pejiuan I saw this time did not look like the high-spirited, noble heir he once was. A series of misfortunes and blows had made his gaze dispirited, and the torment of his current illness made his complexion pale. The people in the residence called him the second young master. He frantically grabbed my sleeve, his eyes bloodshot. "Zhang Yanzhou, you have a way. You must have a way to save me, right?" I looked at his discomposed state and brushed his hand away. He leaned on the bed, his hair disheveled. Seeing my cold and hard attitude, he said with a bitter smile, "You must be secretly laughing at me in your heart. Back then, I scolded you for being restless and not staying put, for practicing medicine everywhere. Seeing you treat all patients without distinguishing between the poor and the lowly, I became even more prejudiced against you. And yet now, I have to humble myself and come beg you." I was silent for a moment, and finally spoke. "My grandfather back then exhausted his entire life's medical skills, but he still couldn't completely cure your illness. The unique acupuncture technique he created could only alleviate the symptoms. Actually, for the marriage agreement between our two families back then, what your grandfather wanted was for a woman from the Zhang family who had inherited our medical skills to marry in, so that you would suffer less from the pain of your illness, and then find a complete cure." As soon as I finished speaking, his face was filled with shock. Then he laughed foolishly. "You knew the truth all along, yet you willingly broke off the engagement. Was it so you could wait to see me reap what I've sown today? To see me full of regret?" He was overthinking it. I simply wanted to get rid of him back then. As for whether he regrets it or not, that wasn't my concern. In the Zhang family, besides me, there was no one else to carry on my grandfather's legacy. My father was solely focused on his official career and didn't put any effort into the art of medicine. Before he passed away, my grandfather told me that when he treated Pjiuan back then, he wasn't able to completely cure him. He could perhaps only keep him safe for 10 years, and for the rest of his life, he would still have to rely on medicine. Pjiuan was wrong that day. He thought the previous Marquis Xuanping arranged the marriage with the Zhang family, just out of gratitude for the treatment back then. He was thinking too superficially. Everything his grandfather did was for his long-term future. Unfortunately, Peijiuan's later choices all strayed from the original intention. Now, the bitter consequences are just beginning to show. The ones who brought me into the manor were Marquis Xuanping's people, which means he never gave up on this son at all. Today, I was not in a position to refuse. I took out the silver needles and slowly inserted the 8 needles into the relevant acupuncture points. At the same time, some color returned to Pjiuan's face, and the look of pain eased. He leaned back on the pillowed couch, let out a long sigh of relief, his forehead still covered in fine sweat. Then, he fell into a deep sleep. I heard from the attendants that the pain over the past few days had already made it difficult for him to sleep. This acupuncture technique, after all, only treats the symptoms and not the root cause. My grandfather was also taking a gamble back then, hoping Pei Jiyuan would have that one in 10,000 luck and never have a relapse for his entire life. Now, I am only performing acupuncture on him because the situation forces me to. But this can only alleviate the symptoms, not provide a complete cure. When Zhang Zhaoying rushed over, she arrived just in time to see this scene. The handkerchief in her hand was crumpled out of shape, but she could only stand aside and watch helplessly. The one who escorted me back to the manor, however, was Gu Hanzheng perfect. I have something to say to him, bringing up the marriage contract again before the emperor is repaying my kindness with enmity. My speaking so bluntly made him look slightly stunned. Why? I don't want you to be ridiculed by the people in the capital. His eyes were full of confusion. The resentment and loathing born from an ill-matched couple are far more terrifying than the world's gossip. Since we have no feelings for each other, this marriage is meaningless. He was silent for a long time, then said, "You will eventually marry someone, since you are going to marry anyway. How do you know I am not a good match?" Those words of his, as it just so happened, hit my sore spot. Marrying anyway. It seemed that no matter how I planned, all my paths led to this one destination. The world expects men to have ambitions to travel far and wide. But for women, the only path given is to assist their husbands and raise their children. But I don't want to choose this path. I want to walk a path of my own. What if I don't want to marry anyone? He had probably never heard words like these before. The gaze he cast over was full of bewilderment. I hope to become a physician who travels the world, tasting all kinds of herbs and curing all kinds of illnesses. Not a lady of a deep courtyard mansion trapped in one corner, who can only be her husband's appendage and shadow her whole life. Wherever I go, I will have my own worth, not relying on my husband's worth to stand. To them, a line of reasoning like mine is too heretical and rebellious, destined not to be accepted by the noble houses. He might not be able to understand my thoughts, and I didn't want to say any more. A noble house like the Marquis Xuanping's manor has too many restrictions and too many secrets. The relapse of Pei Jiyuan's old illness was Gu Hanzhang's doing. As we were approaching the Jiang family, I casually mentioned Marquis Xuanping's attitude, which was puzzling. Gu Hanzhang's gaze swept into the distance as he said coolly, "Pei Jiyuan is his illegitimate son from outside. Not Lu Zhe's son at all. When Lu Zhe confessed to everything that day, it was merely a move to sacrifice the chariot to save the king. Making a killing move in the dark, secretly swapping the heir, was his instruction to Lu Zhe all along." This he must be referring to Marquis Xuanping. No wonder that after the truth was revealed, Marquis Xuanping was still so protective of Pei Jiyuan. But for Princess Haiyang, this must be a devastating blow. She was deceived by the man beside her in bed for over 20 years. Her biological son was adrift in another land, living a hard life, while someone else's son enjoyed her affection, enjoying glory and riches. If she were to learn the truth, how could she not be filled with hatred? It has always been widely rumored in the capital that the Marquise and the princess were a deeply devoted couple, passionately in love. I let out a soft sigh. He laughed very mockingly, his voice exuding a chill. All these years he has put on a show of being deeply affectionate, but in reality, he resents my mother. After the Empress Dowager decreed the marriage back then, he dared to bring a commoner girl back before the grand wedding, had a secret affair, and got her pregnant. That woman was driven out of the Pei family home, and later gave birth to a son, who is Pei Jiyuan. But that woman and Pei Jiyuan could never stand openly before the world, so he personally forged a path forward for Pei Jiyuan, and for that, he was willing to let me die. How could a person like that be worthy of being a father? No wonder Gu Hanzhang is unwilling to change his surname. That day, he held back and didn't reveal these things, just wanting to watch Pei Jiyuan live awkwardly in the Marquise's manor, to make him taste what it is like to fall into the mud, and also to torment Marquis Xuanping again and again. Gu Hanzhang stood beside me and said pointedly, "Empress Dowager wants to summon you to the palace for a medical consultation." His suggestion must have been part of this. 3 days later, someone from the palace came to fetch me. I entered Shukang Palace and carefully examined the Empress Dowager, observing her symptoms. But the Empress Dowager told me to stay in the palace to help her recuperate in peace. I understood Gu Hanzhang's intention. He had deliberately sent me away. In these deep palace grounds, no one would dare to snatch a person away from the Empress Dowager. I stayed in Shukang Palace for a month, and the Empress Dowager was very benevolent to me. In just this 1 month, several major incidents occurred at the Marquis of Xuanping's manor. Pei Jiyuan couldn't endure the torment of the pain and was sleepless all night, eventually developing signs of insanity and committing suicide in the dead of night. Princess He Yang and Marquis Xuanping divorced, and she returned to the princess's residence. Gu Hanzhang also left the marquis's residence, having no connection to it from then on. To outsiders, each and every one of these events seemed outrageous. No reason was given to the public, but after Gu Hanzhang stayed in the imperial study for 4 hours, His Majesty approved everything. I knew the inside story, so I wasn't surprised. If these matters were exposed, it would also be a scandal for the imperial family, so it was better to have a dignified end like this. Several days later, Marquis Xuanping was found to be at fault and was widely denounced in the imperial court. His Majesty stripped him of his title and exiled him 8,000 li. Jiang Zhaoying, as a wife of the Pei family, was also implicated and sent to the Yanting Bureau as a slave, trapped there for life. The great mansion collapsed, its family prestige gone. This was the situation Gu Hanzhang wanted to see. He returned to the Marquise's residence for revenge. Congratulations on getting your wish. May the rest of your life be free from the entanglement of hatred. May you achieve your soaring ambitions and rise high. My voice was slow, and the smile on his lips was slightly bitter. In the end, I couldn't keep you. His voice was very heavy. Now that the Xuanping Marquise's residence is no more, the marriage engagement set by the old Marquis has naturally scattered to the winds. Seeing all these sudden changes, my father seemed to have changed too. He reflected on the ups and downs of official life and the impermanence of it all. How the glory and wealth one craves can turn to dust overnight, and decided it is better to just live as one's heart desires. He told me I could go and do what I love, that the Jiang Corporation's medical skills must have someone to carry them on, and can't be allowed to just die out. Yes, I am leaving, grandfather once said. His fellow apprentice had 2 great regrets in his life, one for saving a person and one for not. He once treated a woman for a private ailment with acupuncture. Although he saved her life, she hanged herself amidst the scolding from her husband's family and the gossip of the world. Later, when he encountered another patient with the same symptoms, he chose not to save her, but this time, the woman died from her illness right before his eyes. To save or not to save, both were wrong. He was overcome with guilt and sealed his needles from then on. That day, I said to grandfather, I am a woman. If I can learn the art of medicine, I can save more women in this world. What they cannot do, I can. From that day on, grandfather became very strict with me and taught me everything he had learned in his life without holding anything back. Now, I am going to fulfill what I said that day. He raised his eyes slightly, thought for a long time, and then said wistfully, You said that day that a marriage engagement without mutual feelings is meaningless. But how do you know I have no feelings for you? If you stay by my side, I won't tie you down. You can still practice medicine and save people. You can study medical arts. You can go out and provide free clinics. If that is the case, it is painted too beautifully. But in this world, how can there be so many good things where you can have both fish and bear's paw? I know all too well what this path he speaks of will face in the future. I said calmly, Can this bit of affection from you stand up against the slander and defamation in the deep courtyards of the inner residence? Can it stand up against the discord sown by others? Can it stand up against the strange looks from the great families? It cannot. Back when he went to the capital for the imperial examination, I knew he had soaring ambitions, and that one day he would surely achieve great things in the imperial court. The woman who stands by his side would inevitably be unable to act as she pleases, and would be bound by rules and etiquette for her entire life. I am unwilling to give up the ambitions in my heart to bet on a promise from you. Perhaps in the future, you will be like Peijiwan and scold me for not being docile and knowing my place, blame me for not being able to become your virtuous wife and helpmeet, and even make you the target of public criticism, facing numerous helpless situations. I know your ambition lies in the imperial court. I don't want to drag you down, and I especially don't want to compromise myself. As my voice fell, his gaze dimmed, filled with sorrow. Finally, he forced a smile. Then I will wait for your good news. In the future, if you become a divine physician renowned throughout the world, I, here, will also be able to hear of your great fame. All right. Many years later, we might meet again among the weeping willows of Jiangyan, or in the snowy lands of Mobe. By then, you and I might have both achieved what our hearts desired. I stepped onto the departing carriage, and he watched me leave. From now on, I will traverse the mountains and rivers, and lightly smell the fragrance of the medicinal herbs.